You are watching D5.
Hello, welcome to D5 Dreamlirious, a new story segment with a twist. Let's get started.
It was a cold and foggy night that I realized I'd have to walk myself home alone from work. Bundling myself up in a long coat and tightening the straps of my boots, I steeled myself for the cold, bitter kiss of Mother Nature as I stepped outside onto the silvery cobblestone streets. Puddles had gathered in the pockets of the stones to cast an eerie, distorted shadow of my own reflection to me. Thick fog walls surrounded me on each side as my boots rang out with every step against the ground. Lost in thoughts, attempting to sort out the affairs of the day, I was suddenly snapped to my senses when I realized I was no longer amongst the familiarity of buildings I usually glide past en route to home, or amongst any buildings at all. Where am I? Was the only thought visiting my mind, and only briefly as a figure slowly formed through the fog ahead of me. At first it could be perceived as perhaps a waste bin or a bench from a side view, but as I grew nearer, it began to take shape of a hunched, winged demon. Rational thought persisted, though, that such monsters don't walk the earth. Alas, I was amused, once the fog had thinned between us by proximity, to find it was merely a statue. A gargoyle perched on a short pedestal to marker the entrance to the local cemetery held a copper plaque once reading the town's name and established date of the cemetery, both now rusted away and illegible. Adrenaline still flooding my nervous system and calm struggling to regain control, I was relieved to regain my bearings as to which way was fastest to home. The road from my workplace took two turns. The first being into a park adjoining the cemetery set below the divine grace of a historical church to the people. The second leading to a residential area overlooking the glory of lotus and green trees of the park, the latter being which I had intended to take. The fog had acted to detour me whilst I was in thoughts. Knowing where I was, I presumed to be able to shortcut through the cemetery and approximately arrive on my own doorstep beyond the park. Convinced of my foolish sense of security, I turned to set foot into the graveyard. There, a still and unnatural quiet filled the chilly air, and cloud-like steam seemed to be rising from the graves to coat the grounds of the cemetery. Here, even more figures peppered the fog. A Celtic cross emerged on one side of me, choked by grasping vines that wrapped through its ring and across one of its arms. Also, another winged figure popped out of the fog on the opposite side, this one standing upright with its hands clasped against its breast as if in prayer. Though growing nearer, it would seem the face had crumbled away with time. However, upon closer examination, it was that it had been gouged off by 3 raking claw marks. Suddenly, my breath caught in my throat as the realization I was not alone in this scene was brought to my attention as the sound of a cracking and slurping sound filled the silence. Stopping immediately mid-step as my gaze was automatically drawn towards the source, I saw a muscular hound, similar in form to a Doberman Pinscher, hovering over a bloodied pile of meat, with its tail end towards me. Having an unprovoked fear of canines, upon seeing this filled me with an unbearable anxiety, but this time it was unlike any experienced before. My heart continued to rise in pace until its beating filled my ears. As if it could hear the beating of my heart, the hound turned its ears back towards my direction, one clearly being chewed off at some point. Then my vision began to white on the edges. It felt as though I was holding my breath for well over a minute. Next, the beast let whatever flesh slop from its mouth to the ground as it tilted its head and slowly looked over its left side towards me. It slowly pivoted its body to aim at me. Still frozen with fear, my flight response struggled to initiate, as my reasoning knew I certainly could not outrun this monster. Now able to see the beast from its head end, revealed its opposite eye was just a gray-white orb, as if a pupil had never been there. On the same side, the corner of its maw had torn all the way up to the base of its intact ear, giving it a permanent, seemingly smirk. As it had turned, I could see that large portions of its flesh had rotted away from its side, leaving its ribs to be jutting out through small patches of mangy skin with bloodstains long dried across it, its organs barely hanging on to the edges of bones. Also, though each of its legs was missing huge bites of skin, its front leg was merely a paw hanging on by sinew and muscle, sparsely wrapped around bones attached to its torso. My mind struggled to comprehend that this would be my end, and the heart beating in my ears gradually gave way to the otherworldly growling sound this hellhound emitted as it grew in volume. My knees grew weak, and I stumbled just one step backwards, but enough to trigger the demon's fight response. With ease in 2 steps and a lightning-quick bound, it had latched to me by the throat and took me to the ground. Its jaw, so powerful I couldn't breathe, as it seemingly toyed with me, rolling me left and right, letting out a curious snickering sound. Blood drooled from its widened side jaw, splattering on my face and mingling with my tears of agony and despair. Just for a moment, its vice loosened enough for a choked, pitiful whimper to escape my mouth, giving the hellhound some reason to let out a snickering chuckle before it snapped its jaw closed through my neck. The white portion of my vision had faded to a crimson red as I choked and sputtered, the last of my life leaking from me. Then a snarling smile of the beast was the last thing I heard as it spoke. One.
Hello, you guys. So that was one of my real dreams, written in a story form. I thought would be fun to share. This was the first of many of my dreams I learned that lucid sleep through. This, for example, was a recurring nightmare I had, and the second time for this dream that I saw the hellhound, it spoke the word 2 instead of 1, for example. And for those of you who don't know, to see a hellhound 3 times usually means you're going to die. But in the third occurrence of that dream, for example, I chose to walk past the cemetery and take the long way home, which has probably saved my life. Other than that, thank you guys for watching. This is to be the next section of D5's offering. I chronically have these vivid and lucid dreams, though this leaves me with some days I get no rest. They make for fantastic short stories, though. So, I may not always have these to share. Sometimes I can't remember when I wake up, but I do have a few that I planned on sharing in a similar format to this. So I'm going to get those together and upload those. Probably not within a few weeks, but maybe, you know, usually at least once a month if I can get them together. Now, if you liked this, please like and share this video. That way I know, and so that others can let me know. Happy 2018, guys. This is going to be a good year for us. Please look forward to it.